Okay, well, welcome. I'll just introduce myself briefly and have John introduce himself. So my name is Shane Brott. I work at UNH Cooperative Extension in New Hampshire. My background is, in my job, is really focused on two completely different things. One is mapping technology, so geospatial technologies, and also lake water quality and limnology. John?
Yeah, so I'm John McGee. I'm the Geospatial Extension Specialist here at Virginia Tech, and I'm in the Department of Forest Resources and Environmental Conservation.
So what we're going to go over today is to give you a background and a little bit of a demonstration on something called NEWT, the National Extension Web Mapping Tool. It's something John and myself and some other folks at Virginia Tech have been working on over the past couple of years. It was recently released, maybe 5 months ago, right? 5-ish months ago-ish to the world. And part of what we're trying to do is just tell people in extension, number one, that this exists. Number two, to show them how it could be used, and also what we're hoping to get is some feedback about ways in which NEWT could be even more useful for them, and different directions that we may be able to take it in the future. So some of the presentation I'll do, some of it John will do, and then also there will be a little bit of more clicking and hands-on. But as Mark said, and as we do anyway, we'll stop plenty of times throughout to see if people have questions. So definitely no need to keep your questions to the end. All right, and John will start off talking a bit about the background of NEWT and how we got even to the idea of creating something like NEWT.
Yeah, so this kind of started happening back in 2011. I was working with Mike Lambert over at Virginia Cooperative Extension, and so we were putting together, he wanted to put together situation analysis profiles, which is basically kind of a demographic summary for every county in Virginia. Well, I should say every county or every extension unit. So sometimes those are cities. But anyway, so these were, we hired a student, and we, the student worked really hard, did a great job. But the final product was kind of what this graphic looks like. It was basically, kind of a report, kind of a spreadsheet summary report kind of thing, which was great for, some applications. But, you could look at your county, but you really couldn't compare what was happening in your county to what was happening around your county, or even 2 or 3 counties over, or even, what might be happening in another state. So it was hard to kind of ascertain some patterns and kind of regional issues that might be occurring or that might be heading your way, so to speak. So the idea was to put together something a little more visual. So in 2015, Virginia Tech, University of New Hampshire, and Texas A&M, we received some funding from eXtension to develop kind of a web mapper is kind of what it turned into.
Oops, sorry about that.
Oh, well, that's pretty cool. All right, next. There we go. So there are some other online web mapping options out there, and some people ask, why don't we just use what's available? And so there's some licensing restrictions. There are some states that have web mappers, or localities, obviously, but they're not national or sometimes not even regional in scope. And again, we want to look against look over traditional extension, jurisdictional, and administrative boundaries. So it'd be great if Virginia Cooperative Extension, for example, could kind of see what's coming from the south, from North Carolina, or maybe what's heading towards the west, towards West Virginia. And a lot of these mappers don't meet the specific programming needs of extension. So we developed this mapper to kind of be for extension, and it was really developed by extension as well.
Mm-hmm. And something that people have asked in the past, we'll just mention it here, is there's nothing. Although we designed this specifically for extension, we also anticipate that a bunch of other people will be interested in using the mapping and in the data that are being provided for their own reasons that have nothing to do with extension. But it was very critical for us that it met what we were able to gather, and hopefully from now and into the future, what we're able to continue to gather meets the needs of people in extension.
So this was kind of our goal for the National Extension Web Mapping Tool, or NEWT. It was to develop a national web mapping application specifically designed for the users in extension. And it, well, before I go into that, we'll go to the next slide. And the kind of the key areas of this is it had to be really user friendly. You know, we wanted it to be kind of Google Earth-ish almost. We wanted it to be a cloud in the cloud. You know, it needed to be kind of a web mapper because we didn't want people to have to download software onto their local desktops or download data, you know, update the software, update the data periodically. So if all this is done in the cloud, which is, you know, the cloud is basically just using somebody else's computer, really. So if all this is done on somebody else's computer, it only has to be updated once, and then everybody can use it. You know, it had to be a national mapper. We wanted it to be flexible so that it could grow and expand as extensions needs developed and changed. And, you know, we really wanted it to be a distributed data model, which means that, you know, again, we didn't want to have to host the data on one of our servers or on somebody else's server. We wanted to I guess, stream the data from the original source. So example, if we were just pulling data down from the US Census, then when the census updated the data, you know, we wouldn't have to copy it somewhere and then pull it down. We can just, once they update the data, it comes straight to us updated. And the same thing with data coming from the Center for Disease Control, from the USDA, et cetera. So we're just basically pulling data straight from these sources, so we don't have to spend time updating them. And again, it was developed by extension and for extension. Ooh. Okay, so here's a question. We're ready for questions yet?
Yeah, well, the one question is who pays for the maintenance fees? That's the one question that has been.
That's a very good question, Eliza. You want me to handle this one, or do you want to handle it?
You can go for it.
Okay.
That's fine.
So yeah, right now, the maintenance fees, we're working on a maintenance fee model. Right now, you know, we're trying to figure that part out. And we don't have a solution in hand yet, and that's one reason we're taking kind of NEWT on the road, is we want to get this in front of as many stakeholders as possible, because I feel like the more stakeholders we have, the fewer, you know, we can spread the maintenance fees across a much broader group of stakeholders.
Yeah, and well, in the funding that was provided by eXtension made the development of NEWT possible, because there's no way that we would have gone from where we were to having a functional, mostly feature complete tool for people to use. But the reality of any online system is there has to be some, even just basic maintenance, there are some costs over time. And then, of course, if you like to expand it or add more data, there are costs involved with that. So there's lots of ways you could envision maybe that this could work. It could be more grants. It could be that some agency pays for it. It could be if states want their data available, they each individually pay for it. It's hard to know what the exact model is, but I would say, as John just mentioned, we are open to ideas and we're exploring possibilities. So we're all ears to have any sort of models that we can consider.
Exactly. You know, and in the past, you know, I've kind of thrown out the idea if we could get every state to throw in $1,000, we'd have maintenance fees covered and we'd be able to do lots of enhancements. So, you know, the idea is to spread, I don't want to say spread the burden, but that's kind of what I'm suggesting, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you talk about how much something would cost too. And I've been involved a lot, you know, as people working in geospatial technologies, you're often talking about ways they could be used, and there's often some cost involved with those. And sometimes people look at it from the standpoint of, well, how much additional would this cost us? I always ask them to, you know, turn it back around and say, okay, let's say that this technology costs you $5,000. Like, what does it let you do that you can't do now? Or what time and money is it saving you by being able to do it in this new and different way? And often, even though sometimes something seems like an initial cost, and it may be, it could very well be that the return on investment of that cost completely offsets the cost altogether, because the amount of time and energy, and of course people's time does cost money, that it saves you winds up, maybe it saves you $10,000 worth of time and energy, even if you're just able to do something more efficiently than you could do it before. So I think part of the idea is figuring out, as we get this in front of more people and they give us feedback, maybe it's not something that they need, or maybe it's something they only need in 20 states, or maybe it's something that once people know it exists, it saves them 50 hours of effort per year, or how much does that worth? So I think that there's lots of different ways to see or to think about how that money, what that money actually gets you versus what you have now, and how to think about different models for that. But yeah, we're wide open, and that is a key issue, because any technology that's relied on people maintaining it and hosting it, there is some cost to somebody somewhere for that to happen. Okay. So a couple of things that we thought were very important in how the system would work is that data would be available for your region of interest. So, and we thought it was important to let the people who are using it define what their region of interest was. So all the data sets that we have up there now are national in scope, but if you wanted just your state or just your county, or the county, your county, and all the counties that are touching it, we wanted to be able to have people choose. One of the things that we thought was really important was letting people get the information they need, but not necessarily be distracted by the information they don't. And from my own experience, although John had sort of this idea of these county profiles, I was coming at NEWT from the very direct experience of me trying to work with some Nutrition Connection folks, which is a food education program here in New Hampshire, where they wanted to just know what are the characteristics of these folks or this demographic in these counties. And somebody sent them a link, and it had 800 different layers, and it even took me as a GIS user 15 minutes to figure out how to even use the map. And then once I did, it was an overwhelming amount of information. So while we thought it was important to look at it nationally, we'd hope that people look just not at their county and their state, because they're missing a bigger picture. We wanted to let people be able to filter. So you can see over here on the right that this was a map that was created just looking at 3 different states as opposed to all of it. Also, we wanted it to be available on geographies of relevance to extension. So at this point right now, the data are in there. As John said, we're just pulling them from other places or at the county level. So that's the finest grain of data that we have currently in the map. But you can also choose to display or to look at information at the county level, the state level, any group of states or counties, the national level, but also, as far as we know for the first time ever, by extension district level. And so you see on the left here, New York State is shown with the red indicating the extension districts. We were unable to find any, certainly digital version of an extension district map nationally, so part of our project was to go through and create this. The other thing, of course, and not every state has districts. For example, New Hampshire does not have districts. It just has 10 counties and then the state. So for the states that did have districts on that district map, they are shown. So occasionally, depending on the state, that may be the operational unit that folks are looking at and interested in seeing summary statistics for. Now, we mentioned it's on the front slide, and maybe John could talk a little bit about this. But while John and I were with folks that got the grant and were spearheading this effort, the actual data, the development of the tool and a lot of the data work was done at Virginia Tech by the Center for Geospatial Information Technology. You can see their logo up there in the right. So John and I didn't do any of the coding ourselves, and I have to say that it was interesting to work with the technology folks, because John and I both use mapping and we know a lot about it, but as far as being able to develop a tool like this, we certainly aren't able to do it on our own. And but having extension folks directly involved with planning this and thinking through it, it really helped the tool, I think, to be a lot different than it would have been if we had just requested a simple web mapping and data exploration tool. And I feel pretty confident saying that what we had envisioned in the beginning was very, very close, or what has been realized by CEJA is very, very close to what we had envisioned in the beginning. So that was been, I think, a pretty good success for this project and for our work with CEJA. I don't know, John, if you have anything additional to say about that. But.
Yeah, no, and CEJA would be, that's when Liza asked a question about maintenance and hosting, and so CEJA would be that's the organization that would potentially maintain and host this this application over time.
Yeah, and they are the ones who develop it and are currently maintaining and hosting it, even though the grant period has ended. All right, let's see here. So it was funny too, because we really wanted this to be a mapper, but also a way for people to find data and find data that they needed. So in addition to looking at the spatial scale, we wanted people to be able to easily discover the data that they wanted to do or wanted. And I'll never forget this, the first wire model presentation. We were looking at the various screens that they envisioned. And something very similar to what you see on the top of the screen here showed up as maybe the third layer deep in, in the mapping tool. And both John and I, even though we were in different places, so I could tell, we both said, that's it, that's it, that's how it starts. We want this to be the front page. We want to guide people through this. Now, if you know what you're already looking for and you're comfortable searching, then that's fine. But we really wanted to have people who really didn't know even what data exploration was or what data layers were available to have a fairly easy step-by-step process to find it. And then once they found the data layers of interest, we wanted them to be able to see them in the way that they would find useful. So one of those ways, of course, is mapping. It's not the only way, but that is one way that we wanted people, even with no GIS experience at all, to be able to find data and put it on the map and start to look at it themselves. So the way that this tool works, and I'm just going to show it step by step, and then we're going to go and actually look at it live, is at first you define who you are or what extension area you're interested in. I will say that it was up to us/CGIT to define for these groups what data layers would be of interest. And I will admit, I would imagine John would admit, that we may have been, that there may be some disagreement. Once people look through these, we did our best for our first shot. But what we also are hoping over time is we get feedback on which data layers are of interest to the folks in these different categories, and especially if they go into a category and they are looking for data that aren't there, that would be good to know as well. One of the things we wanted to do was have a tool that worked fairly completely with a more limited set of data, instead of trying to get as much data as we possibly could and spend all the money on that, instead of having and have a tool that didn't work as well. So once you choose in a specific area, you then have this subcategory, and you can see the groups of data that we felt were related to that category. And then once you get to that level, you define what are your areas of interest. So you can do it by states, counties. There's a variety of things you can do.
Extension districts.
Extension districts is one of them. Yep. And then once you get to that, it says, okay, given your general topic and given these areas, what are the specific topics that are available? And these are, as John mentioned, we're pulling them from various places. So these are based on whatever the data are in those locations, with census data or otherwise, and you can see exactly what they are. You can choose to select them, and the details on the right, as you have your cursor, as you click on various of the topics over here, the details shown are just based on whatever those data sources say and give you a pretty good idea of what you're going to find. And then you get a set of results that says, these are the ones that you selected, this is the geographic level they're available in, here's the states you've chosen, and these are the years. And some people will say, well, gee, do you have data for 2014 for this? Well, if the data are available through the data source, we have it, and if not, we don't. So those are not choices we made to say we only want 2008 and not 2009. It was just that the data were available for those years. And then once you're done, you can click, and one click, you can go ahead and view it on a map. You can see in the upper right, if you hover over any individual area, so for example, if I click on this county, the value will appear in the upper right, sorry, the upper left, will show the actual value, and also the location, so this county in Oregon, and the whatever data layer you're looking at, by default, there will be a text box which will say the name of the data layer. That can be moved, repositioned, and also typed in, so you can make that whatever you want for the title of the map, but that's the default, is to show what the actual data layer is that you're looking at that moment. And importantly, and this is something that hit home very solidly to me when talking with those Nutrition Connection folks, is you might not just want the map. I mean, maybe you just want the table. And that's fine, because that's a different way of looking at exploring the data. In this system, you can look at either. And I remember finally when we figured out after half an hour of work how to get the data layer up that they wanted, they said, well, that's nice. We can see it on the map, and we like that, but we really need the numbers. And they said, well, how do we get the numbers now? I said, well, you just go ahead and you take your cursor and you hover over each county. And then said, and then what? I said, then you take a pencil and a piece of paper and you write it out. And you could see the quizzical look in their face. We went through all of this so that we can write things down on a piece of paper while looking at the screen. And in New Hampshire, there's only 10 counties, so it wouldn't have taken that long. But it just shows you that sometimes the map is really great, but other times you really want the actual data. So we thought it was important to have both of those available in the tool. So this is the front page of NEWT. We're going to go ahead and look at the NEWT actually in action right now. One thing that you can see at the top of it is that you have home. When you first get to the front page, you can see right there in the bottom, or the middle and bottom of the page, is that exploration that we just went through. So it's right there in your face. If you know nothing about what you're doing, you can go ahead and explore data. Also notice up here on the toolbar, there is a mapping link. So if you know you want to map and you're comfortable searching in different ways, you can just click on the mapping button and you can go straight to that mapping interface without having to go through the data tool from the beginning like this. All right, so we'll stop there to see if there's any questions, or John, if there's anything you have to say that I didn't cover.
Do you want to cover the My Extension thing up there, or save that?
That was going to be I was going to wait till the end for that, but. All right, any other questions not related to My Extension? Let's see, I don't see anything floating up here. Mark, have you noticed anything that we haven't?
Nope, I think you guys got it.
Okay, good. So I think last time, John, I showed it.
Yeah.
Do you want to, or do you want me to? Or?
Go crazy, Shane. Go crazy.
Okay. All right, we will do that. So first, a couple of things that we do have a web page, and this is something that was in the link for the actual webinar, but there's one page where we're collecting all the information about NEWT on this MapAssist website that John and I have worked on for a while. And so if you're looking for anything related to NEWT, including the link directly to NEWT, the link to the survey that we're looking for feedback, or a link to our webinar, all of it's going to be always found on this one page, which is mapassist.org/NEWT. So that is something that we will update over time as different pieces of information become available. So let's go ahead and look at the live version of NEWT. So as you can see, it's pretty much just going to go through that basic interface that we went through first. Now, if anybody has any preferences or things they wanted to look at per se, but we can always go through the same example that we just did. So again, you choose the subcategories that you're in. You can always just click on this to select all if you'd like. I want to click on next. And then this is the interface where you get to choose what areas that you want to look in. As we said, it's nice to be able to winnow down the data to look at only the thing that you're interested in, although we hope the idea of having a map would encourage you, as John's mentioned already, to look around the area that you're in. And we feel that that is one of the potentially good things about mapping, is that it forces you to expand your horizons a bit. I know we're very much focused, at least in New Hampshire and Extension, on our operational units, where we may be mixing bigger pictures that are going on that would inform even what we're doing within our own extension by looking more across borders. So you can choose by state, by extension district, or by county. And so for the example I already did, we'll do California. In order for you to go forward, you have to click add so that they pile up over here. And that is one thing that John and I also thought was important. It wasn't in the original tool that then we said this is really important to let people collect these. And you can see your options that are choose by state, extension district, or by county. But let's do California. Let's see, what did we do? We did Oregon. And, oops, sorry. We'll do Washington. Washington. And click on add. And click next. And then here is a list of all of those different data layers that are currently available based on what we're doing and how we set it up. Again, this is not the ultimate list of everything that's possible, but at least from a starting point, which we did do some focus groups in Texas and Virginia and in New Hampshire to try to get a handle on what would be some of those data layers people would be most interested in. So let's just go ahead and select some of these Get started and click on next. So from this point, you can see the list of what you've chosen. And to start making a map of any of them, you can go ahead and just click once to get to the mapping interface. Now, how quickly this loads is based on a whole variety of issues. Your internet speed, your computer speed, the speed of NEWT servers, and also the speed of the original host data. So remember, John said we're connecting to other data that's outside of where NEWT is housed. And over here, which had disappeared, but you could see it says retrieving data. And I like that. I think that it's good because if it didn't show you anything and you just sat there waiting and not knowing when something was coming or even if it was loading, that could be a definite problem. So here you have that same map that we showed in the capture of the slides for the other part of the presentation. So as you hover over these different areas, the values appear. As you scroll down this page, you can see that table as well. Couple of things to know about the mapping interface. If you know nothing about mapping or GIS, that is perfectly fine. You don't need to know anything. And in some ways, this might be enough for you, right as is. Things you can alter with this. You can grab this title if you think it's title that you want to use and you can put it somewhere. If you want to edit it, you can edit it to make it say whatever you choose to make it say. You also have a legend down here that you can move around in place. You can control the way the map looks by these various buttons up here. You can change the base map. And I will say, as somebody who has a lot of experience in mapping, people often want a much more complex base map than makes sense for them to use in a given map. So try to think about the base map as something that will provide context but not distract from the point that you're trying to make. And you can see there's a variety of options that you have. If you go to boundary, you can choose one of these boundaries to be shown on top. So you could just have simply the boundary of the US. You could have congressional districts, states, extension districts, and counties. And so for the states, at least for this version, the first version of the extension district map, for states that had no districts, we chose, so for example, I'll just know New Hampshire. We'll look over here. We have no districts, but we instead use the county boundaries. And then a state like New York that does have districts, we use those boundaries, but did not use the county boundaries in this extension district map. So you could choose whichever of these you would like, or you can choose to have no boundaries on top. And when you click on symbology, there's a bunch of things you can do, but the important thing to think about is you could change the colors. So you could say for a different ramp of colors that are available, and there's lots of different options that are already built in that you can use, including some that will make a very hideous looking map. Yeah, giving people lots of options gives them a lot of responsibility too. So some of these may not be the ones that you choose. The other is that the overlay boundary, if you didn't like red, for example, and you wanted it to be a different color, you can choose that color here and change that, because the default is red, but based on what the underlying data display that you choose, it may be that a red line doesn't work well. You click on elements. This is where you can change the name, choose to show a north arrow or not, even choose to get rid of a base map, which is actually an interesting feature. Sometimes that's hard to do in online mappers, and decide if you want a title or not, and then choose to update the title. So there's a decent amount of control you have over it, but hopefully none of it is so complicated that folks can't figure it out easily, even without a lot of GIS experience. The one thing that's a little bit different is this classification. If you know about classification, there's the standard things you can do. If not, you might just want to keep with whatever the standard default situation is and choose the right colors, but there is the capability to do that. So within, again, no GIS software, no GIS training, by doing those things, you can come and make a pretty decent looking map of the data that you just found and selected. Okay. So are there any questions about that as far as how the map works, the symbology? You can, and this is a question people always ask, can you print this? Yes, you can print. The option is print from browser. If you've ever tried to print web pages, you know sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't work very well. One thing I tell people when they're talking about printing online maps is you can always take a screenshot. So no matter what computer you're on, you either already have a screenshot software built in or you can get some for free. So I'd be less worried about using the built-in printing and instead design the map the best you can within what this software lets you do. Take a screenshot and then take that screenshot and put it into whatever other software you want. If you have an image editing software you like, that's great. PowerPoint's also great. If you just plop it into PowerPoint and you can draw different elements on top of it, that would work as well. Now, the interesting thing, of course, that I first thought when was designed this way is, oh boy, I loaded one data layer. Can I show more than one at once? The answer right now in the tool is that you cannot show more than one at a time. You can change your background map. You can change the overlay on top, the boundaries. You can't show more than one data layer at a time. Perhaps that's something people are interested in doing more of. And part of what we're also thinking about is this tool is supposed to do certain things. If you're interested in overlapping a whole bunch of data layers, it might also be that other tools are the better option for you. But it may be possible as well to have this have multiple layers. So you know all of the data layers that you discovered in that tool have been populated here. So even though you could only click on one to load it, these are the results that I selected in that previous window. So if I wanted to look at a different data layer, for example, there's fast food restaurants, I would click here in 2014, the layer, and it's going to go ahead and load it. And then this is that new data set. The default values are going to be, or the default symbology is going to be the same, but you can go ahead, click up here to colors, and change it to be whatever options that you want to get back to searching for more data. You can click back up here on the home page, but also built right into the results page, there's this Discover New Data button, which brings you back into the search. Okay, and then the other item, of course, we talked about was tables. So this is the table. Now, some tables may be unwieldy to look at in here. For example, there's 133 counties in this area, so I don't know if you want to go through it scrolling, but notice you can also search. Let's see if we search for something that we see. So if I knew I was looking for El Dorado County, all I would have to do is start typing it, and it would automatically and immediately filter the data. Notice, too, that if you click on it here in the data table, it zooms the map and indicates where it's located. And unlike the map, this data, there's a ton of ways to get it out. So you can copy it and paste it, or you can have it come out as a CSV, an Excel file, a PDF file, or even to print it. And just to show you when you print it, oh, sorry, let me undo this search. Well, number one, the search filter works when you print it. But if you didn't, notice that it produces this, unlike often when you print web pages that come out all strange, this does know that when you click print, you're anticipating that you're going to print it on a printer and it formats. There's lots of different ways to get here and get the data out and explore the data, both admin table and on the map.
And you can sort your table. You know, any one of those columns can be sorted. So
yeah, by clicking on them.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So there's a couple of things that are on here which you may notice that we haven't mentioned. For example, My Extension. You might notice there's a login button over here. And you might notice that there's a chart view down here that doesn't seem to load. But we're going to talk about that in a moment, and I'll pass it back over to John to cover those. So does anybody have any questions so far about, now that you've seen it, how it works, the generalities of the mapping or the data table, or how to go through looking for data and then exploring it?
Nope.
Okay.
Not
Yes,
yet, anyway.
All right. So we'll go ahead and move on for John to wrap things up here.
So yeah, so this was basically, a pilot project. We wanted to see what we could do and see how far we could go. And I think we all think there's areas where we can go farther. So these are some areas where we looked at for future enhancement. And one was what Shane mentioned, the login, the My Extension login. So the idea behind this is, you would have your own username and password, you'd log in, and you could set preferences. So if you were an agent or a specialist from, I don't know, from Minnesota, and you wanted to automatically have NEWT zoomed into Minnesota when you logged in, that's what would happen. Or if you had certain data layers that you were interested in and you didn't want to have to query them every time, you could have those those saved as preferential data layers, I guess. So there's all kinds of opportunities that we could do with the My Extension login. Graphing and charts, we had hoped to have a graphing feature because, we want this data to be visual, and, maps are visual, but I think graphs and charts also provide another powerful tool for visual comparison and analysis. We can have some advanced selection capabilities incorporated in the tool, some additional analytical capabilities. We could do hotspot mapping, for example. Basically, for those of you who have done or seen GIS, basically anything that you see in a normal GIS desktop system could be incorporated here. Although with that being said, we are trying to keep this user friendly, and we don't want it to have kind of feature overload or anything. Data updates, we could incorporate new data fields. We could have additional, more recent data. And it would be interesting not only to have more recent data, but maybe look at trends over time. So you could compare 2000, census data from 2000 to 2020 or 2015 or whatever. And then one final item that has been discussed is enhance the geographic mapping capabilities and enable people to drill down to finer levels of geography, including the census tract and the census block group levels.
Yeah. And one thing I think is important that John said, even though people get very excited when they start playing with this, and is that we don't want this to become so complex that it doesn't fulfill its primary mission, which is to let anybody in extension nationwide be able to access data that they're interested in easily, find it, and look at it and export it in the ways that will be most useful to their job. Yeah. And so some of the things that people say, well, we could also do this, and we could also do this. We're excited by it. And sometimes there are things we haven't thought about. And sometimes people are excited about what they could do with GIS in general. And it may very well be that some of the things people want to do, NEWT in its current or even a potential future version, would not be the best place to do it. So I think we have to be excited by all these possibilities, understand what of these functions would help the current version of NEWT be more useful to more people, and make it even potentially more useful, but also keep an eye to what this tool is supposed to be in the role it's supposed to play. Because if you want to do everything possible with GIS, well, NEWT's never going to be in everything possible with GIS tool, nor should it be, because that's what we're actually trying in some ways to get away from.
Exactly.
Because that's what winds up being so distracting and difficult for people to use. So the question is what the threshold would be, hopefully, as we find more people interested in this, more people to use it, and funding to continue it and to update it, to be vigilant about making sure the changes are helpful to the mission of the tool and not pull it in directions that make it maybe more powerful but then less useful for the intended use in our vision for it. It could be that our vision was off or that our vision needs to change, but I think that has to be a filter that we use as opposed to saying we've got this one tool to do every GIS thing that extension needs. I think that would be A, would never happen, and B, would distract from what this is supposed to do. And it would make those people who are confused by the past tools confused again, which is not what we want. Definitely. Okay. I think that, oops, haha, guess we never changed that. Sorry about that. So the pages that I showed you briefly, but also that I wanted to have here in the recording was that we do have the beta, which we're calling NEWT Beta, is live now at that web page. So There's nothing that's restricting people from using it at all. You don't have, as we said, you don't have to log in. You can't even log in, but we don't have to log in. We suggest people go and use it. And if it's useful for what people want to do now, then they should go ahead and use it. There's no reason not to. We're looking for feedback, and there's a couple of places you can find that. Here's the absolute link, but also both in NEWT itself and also on the NEWT webpage, which is shown down below. There's a link, and we're trying to get feedback from people. We want to know what was useful, what wasn't useful. So what data did you hope would be there and you didn't find, or what additional functionalities would be useful to you so that we can see going forward how we can position NEWT to be have the maximum benefit for the widest number of people in extension. And then again, that link I showed you before, mapassist.org/NEWT, that will be the page where will be updated as more information becomes available, the webinars, this feedback link. There will be some things coming out, blog posts, articles, and everything related to NEWT can always be found at that page. So I think that's pretty much all that we have. I don't know if, John, you have any last comments to think about or to put out there?
No, I don't. I think, we would like to encourage folks, if you also know of other folks who might be interested in NEWT, to pass the word, help disseminate the knowledge, and just, but basically this is a marketing strategy now. We want to get the word out.
Uh-huh. And as I said, the information would be at all of those locations. If you're going to send them to one place, send them to the link below. And feel free to reach out to either John or I. Either one of us will be able to answer questions. And there are some things John is more integrated with, being at Virginia Tech and working directly with CGIT than I am. But either one of us or both of us would be good contact points. And if it happens to be one of us would be better than the other for a specific issue, then we'll be. I'm not seeing any questions appear. So
nope, that's it. And again, I'll post. We'll be posting a link to the recording on the Learn event. I'll get that to Shane, and then he'll upload it to YouTube. And feel free to share that with friends or colleagues who are not able to join us.
Great.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. See you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.